The year is 1898. The voyage begins in grandeur. With the help of 8 tugs, the Titan is drawn into the river and pointed toward the sea, and once the pilot is dropped off east of Sandy Hook, the true crossing begins. Deep below decks, stokers feed the furnaces like men condemned to labor inside a metal volcano. Oilers move through plunging machinery, listening for the one false sound that could mean disaster. Above them, passengers settle into music, conversation, reading, sea air promenades, and the cushioned calm of upper-class travel. Everything about the Titan suggests perfect order, a floating city of steel, routine, and confidence, built not merely to cross the Atlantic, but to conquer it. But beneath that polished order walks John Rowland, and for him this voyage is already haunted. While the crew scrapes, sands, paints, and scrubs, Rowland catches sight of a woman among the passengers, Myra, the woman he once loved. 5 years have passed, yet one look from her still hits him like a wound reopening. He is no longer the man he had been then. He is a common sailor now, scarred, unsteady, disgraced, and soaked through with the appearance of failure. She sees him too, and recoils not with tenderness or pity, but with fear. She retreats inside to her husband, Colonel Selfridge, clutching her little daughter Myra, and speaks of Rowland as though he were some fallen, dangerous thing from her past. A man whose love turned bitter, whose unbelief offended her, whose collapse into drink seems to confirm every judgment she ever made about him. That is one of the cruel strengths of this story. Almost no one sees clearly. To the officers, he is a drunk. To the passengers, he is a rough sailor. To Myra, he is a ruined man from whom she once drew back in revulsion. But underneath the wreckage there remains intelligence, memory, shame, and a conscience that is not dead at all. In fact, in these chapters, John Rowland is almost the only person aboard the Titan who still possesses a moral sense strong enough to be inconvenient. And soon it will become very inconvenient indeed. As night falls, the weather turns vicious. A hard wind blows out of the northeast. The sea strikes the bow. Spray lashes upward. Fog folds itself around the ship until the Titan seems to be charging into a wet gray wall. Still she does not slow. Not for darkness, not for gale, not for common prudence. The officers keep their watch, the lookouts strain eyes and ears into the murk, the passengers sleep on in safety and ignorance. High above the deck is sent up into the crow's nest lookout, and the officers casually note that he is the man brought aboard drunk the previous day, the sort of man whose testimony can always be doubted later if necessary. Then comes the cry, something ahead. The first officer shouts for details. John Rowland sees it before the bridge truly does. A sailing vessel crossing the Titan's bow in the fog, dead ahead and too close. Orders are shouted, the wheel is thrown hard over, watertight compartments are closed. The captain is summoned, but there is no real time to save anyone. The Titan is moving too fast, too heavily, too arrogantly for last-second seamanship to matter. She strikes the smaller vessel not with a thunderous cinematic smash, but with something colder and more horrible, almost no effort at all. She cuts the ship clean through, wreckage rattles down, the 2 severed halves vanish into the darkness astern. And from one of them, above the shrieks and confusion, comes a sailor's curse hurled after the great liner, a curse against the brass-bound murderers who have done this thing and steamed on. And that is the real moral collision of this episode. Not merely steel against wood, or speed against chance, but power against responsibility. The Titan can destroy another ship so completely that she scarcely feels the blow. The damage to her own body is trivial. The damage to the human beings she has just encountered is total. And because the wealthy sleep undisturbed, because the compartments remain dry, because the engines never truly stop, the temptation immediately arises to do what institutions so often do when catastrophe is survivable for the powerful: deny, minimize, conceal, move on. The crew are gathered quietly. The captain questions them one by one. He wants not truth, but manageability. Carpenters report the ship is sound. Watchmen report there is no serious passenger alarm. The evidence of disaster exists mostly outside the Titan now, somewhere in the Black Atlantic, where the dead and drowning cannot climb aboard to testify. Then Rowland enters. And Rowland does testify. He tells the truth as he sees it, that nothing could be done at such speed and such fog, yes, but that the very fact of such speed is itself the crime. The captain offers him money, £100, in exchange for silence. It is not even disguised as principle. This is business, reputation, company protection, avoidable embarrassment, but Rowland refuses. He calls it wholesale murder and says he will speak at the first opportunity. When the captain tries intimidation, Rowland proves unexpectedly dangerous. He knows law. He knows seamanship. He reveals that he is not some ignorant hand before the mast, but a graduate of Annapolis, a fallen officer, yes, but still a man who understands the full enormity of what has happened. That refusal changes everything. In another kind of story, this might be the moment when integrity begins to restore a broken man, but futility is darker and more cynical than that. Here, conscience does not elevate, it simply paints a target on him. The captain studies him, searching for weakness, and finds it in whiskey. If John Rowland cannot be bought, then perhaps he can be discredited. Whiskey is placed in his coat. More whiskey is offered. Plans are laid to push him into delirium, to make him see snakes and ghosts and hallucinations, so that by the time the ship reaches port, he can be dismissed as a wrecked alcoholic with a diseased imagination. It is a chilling little conspiracy, not because it is melodramatic, but because it is so plausible. When truth becomes dangerous, power often prefers pathology. Better to say the witness is mad than admit the institution is guilty. Then, just when Rowland's mind is already burdened by the collision, the story twists the knife personally. The next morning, in a pocket of sunlight on that immense ship, a little child runs laughing into his work area and clings to him. It is little Myra, Myra Selfridge's daughter. For a brief instant, Rowland softens completely. He lifts the child, jokes with her, and for the first time we glimpse not the disgraced sailor or the reluctant witness, but the man he might once have been, warm, human, almost happy. Then the mother appears. She sees only horror. She snatches the child away, wild with alarm, and in that instant Rowland understands something that hits him almost harder than the night's disaster. This child is hers, Myra is married, the old dream is truly dead. But Myra and her husband interpret the scene in the darkest possible way. They carry their fear straight to the captain, who is all too happy to use it. Suddenly Rowland is not merely a troublesome witness to a maritime crime. He is also an unstable ex-lover, a potential threat to a respectable woman and her child. It is exactly the sort of accusation that can bury a man before he ever reaches a courtroom. So by the end of these chapters, the news tightens from two directions at once. Publicly, the Titan glides on in majesty, carrying music, wealth, and confidence across the Atlantic as though nothing has happened. Privately, she now contains a secret killing in the fog, a captain engaged in bribery and manipulation, and one ruined sailor who has seen too much and refused to forget it. John Rowland is watched, moved out of sight, and quietly prepared for discredit. The ship itself remains serene, society remains stratified, the machinery still runs, the passengers still promenade. But under that stately exterior, the moral structure is already cracking, and that is what makes these chapters so effective for video. Because nothing visible has yet happened to the Titan herself. She has not struck the iceberg. She has not begun to die. But spiritually, ethically, fate is already aboard. The ship has committed one crime and concealed it. It has chosen speed over life, prestige over truth, and expedience over justice. In stories like this, such choices do not remain isolated. They accumulate. They draw a consequence toward themselves. The sea has been warned, and so has John Rowland. By the close of Episode 2, he stands alone on a magnificent ship, hated by some, pitied by none, believed by no one who matters, carrying in his own bruised conscience the only honest account of what the Titan has done. And while the officers scheme to make him appear mad, the audience can already feel a greater madness moving beneath everything. The madness of calling a thing invincible, and then trusting human pride to prove it.